Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy Advent to you. That word Advent comes from the Latin word adventus, which means coming. So we've got the next 24 days to look forward to the coming of our Messiah, King Jesus. Isaac, super grateful for that teaching on hope, which really prepares me well for what I want to talk about today. Now, you all know what the word hope means. The simplest definition of hope is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen, right? So some of you Bills fans, right, you're like, oh, we got hope. This is our year. Or maybe you're hoping we'll get snow this year because we didn't get much snow last year. So maybe you're hoping we'll get dumped on this year. Maybe you're hoping that you'll get that job, you'll get that position. Maybe some of you are hoping you'll get that gift that you've been longing for underneath the Christmas tree. Right? We've all got something that we're hoping for. Maybe it's something a little bit deeper than that, something that kind of makes you a little bit nervous or frustrated. Because you've been hoping for a relationship to get better, right? You've been hoping for a relationship to get restored. You've been hoping that things would get better at work. And maybe there's like a little bit of a flick of light at the end of the tunnel. You're like, I think that maybe this could happen, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's very likely. It's going to take a miracle for me to be able to see this come to fruition, right? So here's the question I want to deal with today. What do you do when your hope feels like nope? What do you do when you're like, man, I really, really want this to happen, but you've kind of resigned yourself to the fact that it's probably not going to happen? But still, there's just a little bit of a flicker there, like maybe, just maybe I'll see it come to fruition. Now, as you did a great job, Isaac, of again setting me up for today, because when we open up the pages of the New Testament, we discover that the Jewish people were in fact feeling quite hopeless. And you talked about how it had been 400 years since God had spoken, and God primarily spoke to the Jewish people through prophets. And so the very, very last verse of the Old Testament, through the prophet Malachi, chapter 4, says this: I will send you the prophet Elijah. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. And that's it. Like, that is the last word for 400 years. And so for many of the Israelites, again, there's like, maybe God will speak and send us somebody, but man, it's been a long time. And we feel like we are under a curse. And really they weren't. I talk about this every Christmas, but it's worth coming back to it. Because during the time of King Herod, as Luke would describe, and Herod really was kind of a madman, right? Just for some of you, this is reviewed. For some of you, you might be hearing about this piece of history for the first time. Just a little bit about Herod to describe the hopeless situation for Israel. He was the king of the Jews. He was put in place by the Romans to be sort of this puppet king. Like, we know you're kind of a crazy man and insecure, but we're just going to put you in this place called Palestine, Israel, just to kind of keep the peace as we extend the Roman Empire. He was not a descendant of King David, so they did not accept him as a real Jewish king. He had 10 wives. Can you imagine Valentine's Day if you have 10 wives? I mean, this guy, and he killed some of his wives because they ticked him off one day. He got rid of them. He killed 3 of his sons. Caesar Augustus said, it's better to be his sow than his son, because if you were a pig who lived in Israel, you couldn't eat bacon, you couldn't eat pork. You had a better chance of survival being a pig than you did one of his sons, because some of his sons became popular, and he felt like that was a threat, and so he just, off with their head. One man by the name of Aristobulus was a 17-year-old son of one of his wives. He installed him as the high priest. He became really popular, and so Herod had him drowned one day. He killed thousands of rabbis. He killed the baby boys in Bethlehem. And maybe one of the wildest things that Herod did was on his death day, because he was so despised by the people, he was really, really sick. He died of this painful disease that he knew his days were coming to an end. And so he ordered thousands of the leading Jews of the day to be imprisoned. And he said, when I'm about to die, I want you to kill all of those leading Jews in the city to ensure that there will be mourning in the streets when I die. Because he knew that when he died, there would be celebrations. Well, fortunately for those leading Jews, when he did die, they let them go free. You can visit Jerusalem today, and you can see some of the palaces that Herod had constructed. He was an extraordinary builder. He had 9 palaces compared to Caesar, who only had 1 palace. Just a picture of a few of these. Masada, of course, this giant palace on the top of a mountain. Herodium, which was literally a mountain on top of a mountain. They moved a mountain to create this high palace for one of Herod's getaways. But by far the most glorious of all of his architectural feats was the temple at Jerusalem. It took 10,000 slaves 10 years just to build the retaining wall in the temple. People would come from all over the land to be wowed by this amazing temple. So they kind of liked him for that. I took a picture when I was there a while back. You can see these massive, massive stones. The temple was so amazing. It was twice the size and the grandeur of any of the pagan temples in the world. So again, people would come from all over the place to look at this temple. One day, Jesus' disciples were leaving the temple, and they were so wowed by this spectacular building that Mark tells us, as he was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, Jesus, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." And then you read the text, and Jesus says, yeah, but not one stone will be on top of another. He predicted that in 70 AD, that beautiful structure would actually be destroyed by the Romans. Peter Scazzaro, a pastor from New York City, said it well when he said Herod had limitless funds and limitless power. And the reason he had limitless funds is because they way overtaxed the people living in Jerusalem and the surrounding area. So we just sang that Christmas carol that was written probably about 800 or 900 years after the birth of Christ, and yet it fits really well describing the historical context right before Jesus was born, right? Oh come, Emmanuel, will you please come and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here. Even though we're living in the land, we're in exile because we're ruled by Herod and the Romans, and it's kind of like living in your own home, but you feel like you're just grounded and you have no freedom. You're actually in exile until the Son of God appear. You talk about a hopeless situation. You talk about being in the middle of the tunnel and wondering if you're ever going to see the light. That was the scenario for those living in the world of the New Testament. So Luke, who traveled around the Apostle Paul and would record many of the experiences of Jesus and his teachings and his times with the disciples, tells us that he thoroughly investigated, as a journalist, went around, talked to lots of people about Jesus, about the early followers of Jesus, and he records this story for us at the very beginning of Luke chapter 1 in the midst of their hopelessness. Here's what Luke says. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. So they were pastors' kids. Both of them were upright, or both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and regulations blamelessly. It's not that they were sinless, but they were people who feared God, right? They honored God. They followed the law of God, and they served, or he at least served as a priest. But then we discover this thing that kind of messed with the early community of Zechariah and Elizabeth. We discover that they had no children because Elizabeth was barren. And you might think to yourself, if you're not reading ahead in the scripture, you might think to yourself, well, a lot of people have a hard time having children. And, you just wait a little while, or maybe go see a doctor, and maybe eventually you'll be able to have a child. Just, there's hope for you. But we discover that they were both well along in years. They had no kids. And probably for years and years and years, they held out hope, but now their hope became nope. Right? There was no hope for them. They were too old to have children. And I can't prove this. I don't have the details of all of the conversations that took place behind the scene, but there were probably many people living in Elizabeth and Zechariah's community that were like, there must be some kind of secret sin in your life, right? Because that's the chief goal of any woman living in those days, was to have a child. And the fact that they didn't have a child kind of messed with people. Because on one hand, they were really righteous, good people, holy people. But on the other hand, they didn't have any children. So God must be punishing them for their sin. Or at least many people thought that. They were disgraced. I mean, there's probably for years when they're walking through their village, people would kind of give them the look of shame, right? Or the look of disgrace. And as we go on to the text, you'll see that this is in fact the case. Maybe there were some people living in their community who tried to comfort them and say to them, hey, God did it for Abraham and Sarah. I mean, they were like 100 years old. If God gave them a child, maybe they'll give you children, Zechariah and Elizabeth. I don't know, maybe they had that conversation, and Zechariah probably thought to himself, yeah, but that's like a Bible story. That's like, God started this whole thing with Abraham and Sarah. They're the patriarchs. They're just really, really godly people. We're just normal. We're like one of 18,000 priests in Israel. I mean, we're never going to make it in the Bible. We're just kind of walking through life, doing our thing. And I don't think God's going to do for us what he did for Abraham 2,000 years ago. So I got a question for you. When you experience difficulty, right? When you experience hopelessness, what's your sort of go-to? What do you do? I mean, I know sometimes it's tempting for me to throw a little pity party, like kind of wallow in my self-pity. Maybe invite some other people to my pity party so I can kind of feel a little bit better about myself. Maybe that was a temptation for them. Maybe for some of you, when you experience hopelessness, you're just kind of tempted to bring it all inward and get quiet and kind of shut down and put yourself in, quote, exile. I like to say from time to time that I think every single person needs a lightning rod, somebody who you can unload your stuff on, right? And they'll take that and they'll put it into the ground without blowing up your organization or your work or your family. I think everybody needs a lightning rod. I hope Zechariah had somebody, because I don't think we should expect Zechariah to just kind of put it all inward and just deal with it himself. I hope he had somebody where he could kind of unload his struggle, unload his shame and his disgrace. Some of the people talking, yeah, they're really, really good, but there must be some kind of secret sin in their lives. But here's what I love about Zechariah. The text tells us this, that once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, right, despite the disgrace that he experienced and the hopelessness that he was going through, he continued to serve God. He continued to show up, continued to show up and to do his duty. And I just think there's a lot to be said about that, right? I hope that if you're experiencing a struggle, a hopelessness, that you got somebody that you could unload on, because all of us at some point are going to need to show up and put our game face on and just go to work, right? Show up and put your game face on and just serve the kids or whatever it is that you're called to do. And this was a man who said, you know what? I don't like my circumstances. I feel hopeless, but I'm called to do my duty. And he showed up day after day, week after week, year after year, and served the Lord. And it's not like every single morning he woke up and the doves flew off his shoulders and the sun was shining. Sometimes you just got to show up and you just got to serve the Lord. Amen? Okay, so now things are about to change for him, because the text tells us that he was chosen by lot, or he literally hits the lottery. That's where the word lottery comes from, right? He hits the lottery, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and to burn incense. So we discover from R.C. Sproul that there are about 18,000 priests in Israel. 14 priests were given the privilege of offering the incense every year, and he could only do this one time. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that Zechariah has to go into the temple to burn incense, and as the incense rises up, it reminds the people that their prayers are being heard by God. So he's like, wow, I've been given this opportunity to represent the people and to burn incense and to gather the people in the temple courts to pray. And so verse 10 tells us this, that when the time came for the burning of incense, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. So picture this, okay, picture this. Here's the Jerusalem temple. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of people gathered in the temple courts for this special occasion, right? Zechariah is like, wow, this is amazing. Like, God's given me this extraordinary privilege to burn incense, and everybody's out there, waiting for the incense to rise through the roof of the temple up to the heavens to remind them that their prayers are going up to God. And as Zechariah is doing his duty, this is amazing. An angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. Up until this point, right, for the last 400 years, God has not spoken through a prophet. There's silence, there's captivity. There's O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. And all of the sudden, an angel shows up. And when Zechariah saw him, he was startled and gripped with fear, as you would be as well. Now, just what do you have in your mind right now when you think about an angel showing up in the temple? What's that angel look like to you? Sometimes around Christmas time, like I decorated my tree the other day with some of the angels that look something like this. You know, this angel looks a little bit like my daughter, not very intimidating, cute, gives you the nice, warm Christmas feeling, right? I don't think that's the way the angel looked that showed up in the temple with Zechariah. He was gripped with fear because the angel probably looked like a biblical angel, which was much different. So years ago, I was talking to my friend Jeff, who tells just a quick story. He said, when I first got married, my wife, his wife at the time, he's still got the same wife, his wife, they moved to this little apartment, and she says, we need to get a Christmas tree. And Jeff says, no, we don't have enough space in our apartment for a Christmas tree. She says, we got to get a Christmas tree. He says, okay, if we get a Christmas tree, you got to allow me to get the topper. But we're not getting one of those little princess-looking angels. We're going to get a biblical angel. So this is what his topper of the Christmas tree looked like. Which is probably more accurate because the man was gripped with fear. And then, so I'm texting Jeff a couple weeks ago to make sure I got the details of this story right. And I love what he said. He said, I wanted to follow that up with a dragon tree topper from Revelation 12, but that was the last time I was allowed to touch the tree. Okay, so here he is, right? He's burning incense. The angel shows up, and the angel says to Zechariah, do not be afraid. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name John. And about 30 years later, he would also get a last name, John the Baptist. He goes on to describe this boy would become a joy and a delight to you. And many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. This is amazing, okay? This is amazing. The next statement that the angel makes is this. He will go on before the Lord in the spirit in the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And this is exactly what John the Baptist would do. He would show up and roll out the red carpet for the Messiah. Now, this is amazing here, okay? Because as Isaac talked about in his Advent teaching, it had been 400 years since this prophecy occurred. 400 years of silence, and now the angel speaks on behalf of God and says, this prophecy is now fulfilled in the person and the work of John the Baptist, whose role in life is to prepare the way for the advent of the Messiah. Isn't that powerful? Well, Zechariah is like, I mean, you can imagine, like he doesn't even know how to take this all in. So he asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? I mean, I'm an old man. I mean, I know you did it for Abraham, but come on, that's Abraham. Nobody knows anything about me. I'm just a priest, just doing my duty. I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years. I need a sign. And the angel answered, I am Gabriel, and I stand in the presence of God. God has spoken. And I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now, you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their proper time. Now that's interesting, isn't it, that he receives this punishment of silence. Like a few weeks ago, I lost my voice. You know, Isaac gracefully preached for me, but it's kind of a pain to lose your voice. I couldn't yell at my kids at all that week. It was just, it was like this constant struggle, right? And I started to get off on the rabbit trail, like, man, like why would God do that to him? Like Gideon from the Old Testament was like, I need a sign, puts out the fleece. God gives him a sign. Like, why did he take his voice away? And we could spend, hours and hours talking about that. But the simple thing here is that God speaks and he doubts, and now he's going to receive 9 months of not being able to speak, which is a bummer. But Zechariah is probably thinking to himself, that's a small price to pay for the fact that I'm going to get a baby boy. So he has this interaction with the angel, right? And then the text says, meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. They're out there. They've already seen the smoke. They've already prayed. I don't know, when Zechariah gets out, maybe the people are, I don't know what they do, but he's taking a long, long time. And, the scriptures typically give us like a truncated highlight reel. It's probably a longer conversation he had with the angel. But I also have another theory as to why Zechariah took so long. This is my theory, that Zechariah is thinking to himself, I'm about to have a baby boy. And I can't speak, so I can't tell people. So he gets a little bit of blue incense, and he burns it so that he can have a little gender reveal for the people out in the temple courts. It's a little bit early. I see people shaking their heads. It's a little bit early. Got to get you awake a little bit, right? So finally, after he has his gender reveal, right, when he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple. For he kept he's playing charades to them, but remained unable. This is just kind of funny because he's out there like he can't speak. He's like, doing the whole charades. And can you imagine Elizabeth when she finally guesses the correct charade? She's probably like, wow, oh my goodness, that's amazing, right? And when his time of service was completed, he returned home. And after this, his wife, Elizabeth, became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. The Lord has done this for me, she said. In these days, he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people. I mean, she's happy she's about to have a baby because that's the chief goal of every mother in ancient Israel. But in this moment, what gives her the most joy is the fact that she doesn't have to endure the dirty looks anymore. that she is in some ways vindicated because of her faithfulness. So as we begin this whole Advent series, the Unsung Heroes of Christmas, Zechariah is an unsung hero, isn't he? I mean, literally he's an unsung hero because he can't sing. But he's an unsung hero because he's in the background. He's one of 18,000 priests who just shows up every day and does his duty and serves the Lord in righteousness, an upstanding man with integrity, and he's faithful, even though year after year after year there is no light at the end of his tunnel because his hope had become nope. He's an unsung hero. We'll talk about Elizabeth next week, but isn't that amazing that this man, year after year, remained faithful and righteous, even though his hope consistently became nope? I love Isaiah chapter 50. It says this: "Who among you fears the Lord and obeys the word of his servant? Let him who walks in the dark, captivity, exile, struggle, silence, who has no light." You ever been there? Darkness, no light, struggle, hopelessness. Trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. Would you do that this Advent season? Would you trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will guide and direct your paths? Would you be an unsung hero by remaining faithful, just like Zechariah did, even when it feels dark? Would you do that? Would you be willing to do that? Just keep on serving, keep on honoring him, keep on singing his name, even when it feels like your hope has become nope. See, here's the truth. Here's what we celebrate every Sunday when we gather together, that our hope is in his advent, right? Which it's always a little bit awkward because it's like he's already come, but we're celebrating or we're looking forward to his coming. So you kind of got to get your head around this darkness that the people of Israel were experiencing as they were hoping for their Messiah, because he's coming, and we all know he's coming. We've been given a sign that he's coming because Zechariah and Elizabeth have been given a child in their old age, and this child's going to do everything he can to roll out the red carpet for the hero of Israel. And here's the really cool part. 6 months later, 6 months after the angel Gabriel visits Zechariah and Elizabeth, that same angel named Gabriel goes about 75 miles north to a little itty-bitty village, backwoods town, insignificant town called Nazareth, where, as one of Jesus' disciples will say, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? And that angel one day would visit somebody else, but it wouldn't be in a temple. It wouldn't be in the holy city of Jerusalem. It would be in the middle of nowhere, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, who was a descendant of David, unlike Herod. And this baby would be a candidate to serve as the king of the Jews. And this virgin's name was Mary. And we'll pick up that story next week. But let me just close with this. That little baby boy would grow up to be crucified. But 3 days later, he would defeat death. And as the Apostle Paul would describe in 1 Corinthians 15, death has been swallowed up in victory. Therefore, Paul would say, my dear brother, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always, not just some of the days, but always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, just like Zechariah, because you know that your labor in the Lord is never, ever in vain. So remain faithful. Be an unsung hero by remaining faithful even when it feels dark, even when you don't want to get up in the morning, even when your hope has become nope, even when you feel disgraced, even when you feel shamed. Be an unsung hero. Do it behind the scenes when nobody's looking. Serve the Lord with faithfulness. Be upright. Be righteous. And let God, your Messiah, take care of the rest.